What's your "'tis but a scratch" moment? I was a kid visiting family in West Virginia and was playing with some other kids, which somehow involved me being in a tree. I got a little cut on my hand and was inconsolable. Ran to the house for my mom to make it better. She put the smallest of band-aids on it. When I turned around and started walking out of the house, she started yelling, and I was just looked at her like, what? There was a trail of blood coming from the back of my leg. Didn't even notice. Separated two ribs when I slipped going up a staircase. I went down to radiology at work and got an x-ray. Looked at it and said okay, no breaks, and just walked over to the emergency room and got 2 big rolls of ace bandages. Went back to my desk and took off my shirt and t-shirt. Boss walks in and sees the bruises on my chest. Then I said no biggie, just don't make me laugh. Told him what happened, wrapped myself up and went on with life. Absolutely shattered my wrist. Pulverized a couple carpals into dust. Fractured my scaphoid bone and flipped it 180. Spent 2 days trying to convince myself it was but a simple sprain. When I finally went to a doctor, they rushed me into emergency surgery. Later found out the doctors couldn't believe I wasn't incapacitated by pain. Whoops. I actually got stabbed one time in my lower thigh. Walked to the hospital with my coat covering it cause I didn't wanna freak out any kids. All thanks to the wonderful thing called alcohol. Stung like a BTCH the next day though. Broke my tailbone and didn't know for 6 months. Fell off my bike and into some wet gravel when I was 8. No big deal. Scraped my knee and got soaked. Played the rest of the day outside and came home for dinner. Went to use the bathroom, and when I pulled my jeans off I realized I wasn't soaked from the puddle. It was blood. I had sliced a huge gash in my knee, and when I pulled my pants down a flap of skin pulled away and it started bleeding again. My first stitches. I ran into the top of a door frame, did the whole cartoon head outside. Legs flying inside and then falling on my back. Head hurt a tiny bit, so I covered my forehead with my hand with some pressure for a minute. When I removed my hand and tried to get up, my friends who were crowded over me collectively gasped. Turns out I had split my forehead skin open and they could see the bone. I literally wouldn't have known if they hadn't been so freaked out. Couldn't feel a thing. Got 5 stitches and a small scar near my hairline. When I was in kindergarten, my and me friends were attempting to climb a gate, and one of the metal wires was sticking out. I fell, and the wire cut from right above my ankle to my knee. I think my reaction was oh look, blood. A slab of glass shattered and fell on me and my mom. I checked mum for any injuries and went to clean up the mess, which was promptly followed by my mother screaming and flipping her shit. Apparently I had left a trail of blood around the house because the glass left a deep gash on my foot. She even scolded me because I was laughing at the whole situation. Ah, fun times. When I was in elementary school, we used to play this game at recess, where we would try and see how many people we could fit in the tube slide without the person at the bottom falling out. When it came to be my turn to be the person at the bottom, I thought I was being smart by bracing my hands against the wall of the slide. Next kid came sliding down and his foot hit the perfect spot on my hand and dislocated my thumb at the second joint. Other kids laughing that I could only hold one kid in when I held my hand up and smiled and said watch how fast I can make my thumb grow, and pulled it back into place with a loud pop. One of the kids freaked out and told me, and I got sent home for the day, but I felt like the coolest 4th grader there ever was for not freaking out when my bone wasn't where it should been. When I was 10, I was a gymnast and we were practicing a bunch of tumbling passes for a show we were putting on for kids in a summer camp who were coming to use our gym one day. For the show, we had the lights down and were only using a spotlight. Well, one of the girls did a tumbling pass and landed weirdly. She got up and hobbled to the back of the line, and when it was her turn again, she tried to run and immediately fell, and got up and tried again, and the same thing happened. Then the poor girl behind her casually said, "Your bone is sticking out." The lights came on and sure enough, The girl's shin bone maybe was protruding from her shin. She didn't realize it and had still been trying to tumble, but her leg just simply didn't work. When I was in 7th grade I slept over at a friend's place and early that morning we went to go run my paper route with the plan that afterwards we would get fresh baked donuts from the nearby grocery store and then go back and play Mario Kart all morning. On the way to the grocery store I hit some black ice on my bike, locked up the brakes, and flipped over the handlebars when the tires hit dry cement again. I faceplanted into street and had gravel in my gums and cut into my right palm. I brushed it off. We got donuts and played SNES. Although I couldn't hold the controller with my right hand, so I kinda just twiddled my fingers over the buttons. Later we made chocolate chip waffles and went back to SNES. When my mom came to pick me up around noon my wrist was swollen to 3 times its normal size and I could barely move my hand. She took me to the emergency room where we discovered it was broken. I just dealt with it all morning because Nintendo. I got into a car accident and showed up to practice an hour or so later. Riding my bike, got hit by a car. The driver of the car behind the guy that hit me got out and ran up to me telling me she was going to call the paramedics. To stay still. Help is coming. I got up, told the guy who hit me dude never even got out of his car, only rolled down the window a few inches to watch what he's doing and be more careful in the future. Thanked the lady who was trying to help, but looked over my bike and since it was still rideable, continued on my way. I later found out I broke my leg. When I was 6, I badly bruised my arm when performing cartwheels and backflips and at first, when I fell it was no big deal until my arm was swollen and I couldn't bend it. Had to wear a cast for a few weeks. I was playing football soccer and twisted my ankle. Had to stop, but managed to walk to the coach to get home. Walked from the coach stop to my house about 1.5 miles and went to sleep. Woke up the next day and my ankle was the size of a grapefruit and had to call an ambulance due to quite severe pain. The medical examiner assumed my ankle was crushed by a very heavy object as I had fractured 5 bones, broke my leg, and had extensive cartilage ligament damage. I have been told now that I will never heal to 100% again. 3 years later, and I still have pain and my foot goes numb all the time. This is 2 weeks after when my first cast was removed. A field arrow went through part of my thumb. I have a couple stories. When I was younger I had an issue with my knee where it would lock up, essentially dislocating in a minor way. First time it happened I was snowboarding. Fell face forward, and when I tried to straighten my leg it was incredibly painful. I sat on hands and knees for a couple minutes then decided that I had no other option, gritted my teeth, and straightened my leg. There was a loud pop, a very notable shifting of bones, and quite the feeling of crepitus, but 2 seconds later I was continuing down the hill, and forgetting about it. Well, it happened again. Repeatedly, and every time I would just pop my knee back into place and keep going. It really freaked out people when it happened during soccer games. One time it even happened while having sex. Fortunately she had seen me pop it back in before, so she wasn't as freaked out. Eventually had surgery and found out that I had torn my lateral meniscus cartilage in the knee and a flap was lodging itself between the bones. Also when younger, I hurt my ankle jumping off a big snow mound was strictly prohibited by school. I figured it was just sprained, and while it hurt, I hobbled around for a while. Even played 2 soccer games on it with a significant amount of ace bandage securing it. Eventually it wasn't getting better, so I told my mom. I had a fracture about halfway through the distal end of my tibia. Who knows how small it was when it first happened, but definitely made it worse by waiting. Lastly, just a couple years ago I was chasing my daughter at the playground and ducked down under a chest level platform while following her. Came back up on the other side and ran full speed into a hand railing with my face. As usual for head injuries there was blood everywhere. My daughter, about 6 at the time, started to freak out for a second then realized that I was totally calm. Walked to my parents' house right down the road, grabbed some tissues, and drove to the ED. I had a comminuted fracture of the front face of my nose, meaning it was broken into about 4 smaller pieces, and at least one other fracture back in my sinuses. All the playground say parental supervision required. I didn't realize it was the parents that needed to be supervised. I don't know how much this counts because it wasn't due to an injury. After spending a summer doing food truck events, I was gaining some weight. I figured I just got fat from eating too much junk at the events. So I started dieting and running 3-4 times a week. But the fat wasn't going anywhere. I saw the doctor a couple months later, and it turns out it was an 8.5 ovarian cyst over my abdomen. Not fat. Oops. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.